Hey, all lads and lasses, Damphyre here, back again with some more Infinite Lagrange. As promised yesterday, I'm feeling okay to talk, so you are getting the Battlecruiser update. Again, as I mentioned yesterday, the frigates, fighters, and probably the corvettes, I'll wait till after the patch, because some of the corvettes did get a little something, so it might be better waiting in case they decide to add more stuff. So we'll definitely check that out at a later date after the patch hits on the 6th, which isn't too far away anyway. So yeah, in the meantime, Battlecruisers, I'm going to do this twice, and I'm going to do it twice for the reason of, I want to do them as base, and then I want to do them if you've got them like massively outfitted with all the modules and, you know, you've maxed them out. Because it makes a fairly substantial difference, in my opinion, on which ones you run. To an extent. Actually, no, it really doesn't. I think it's basically all the same. Just they get better. So we'll start off, I'll go from worst to last, I think, on this one. The ST-59 at base is absolutely and utterly god-awful, unfortunately, because it's probably the best-looking battlecruiser by a long way. My opinion, anyway. The Eternal Storm's pretty good, too, and so is the CTG. I don't like the Spear, though. But the ST-59, yeah, it's got pretty terrible weapons. It's got a weird mix of anti-large and an anti-small on the cannons, both of which are pretty inaccurate, and it's got lower HP. It's slow as god. It's so slow. It's tragic using them, but at the same time, I'm forced to use them because, you know, I don't have much for any of the other battle cruisers, so it's filling a role for me, ish. So yeah, it's just pretty dire in comparison to the rest of the battle cruisers. Even as a tank, it doesn't really do that well because it's got considerably lower health than a spear. You have to tech it into front row if you want to use it in that front row as a front row tank. When you do tech it into the front row, it doesn't get evasive maneuvers, so it just gets blown up or it disappears out your fleet instead of moving to the mid-row, potentially getting healed back up a little bit and, you know, performing its tank role a bit further like the spear can. So yeah, unfortunately, it's at base probably one of the worst ships actually in the game, maybe. It's really pretty tragic. So I'm going to put it in C tier. Its only redeeming feature is it's free. If you get it at the in your first server, you can get it free there, and it's fantastic. It's great. Just to note, I noticed a lot of people saying that they missed out on it from their first server. I have contacted the devs and said, I know I've got like a lot of viewers that have said they've missed out on this ship. Is there some way to potentially maybe get it some other way, like it gets added to some kind of system or something like that you add into the game, or you know, anything, right? And they said they'll think about it, so you never know, we might get lucky there, we might see it. Next up, in my opinion, is the Eternal Storm going into B tier. It is better than the ST-59. It's got a better DPM output. It struggles to all hell against frigate Desi fleets, but if they are cruiser and up fleets, it can do some substantial damage, and versus other battle cruisers, it's actually very, very strong even at base in that role. So yeah, that's my thoughts on the Eternal Storm at base. We then have the Spear of Uranus. I'm also going to put that into B at base. It's really damn slow. The base weaponry that you get on it is pretty tragic and can't hit a barn door from inside the barn. So yeah, it is better than the ST-59. It fills that tank role at least. It even gets evasive maneuvers and everything. So, you know, it can be used like that. But just don't expect it to be your DPM ship at all at base. The CTG, I'm going to put into A tier. I don't really think it stand out at S tier at base, but it is probably better than the other three. And yeah, it's got substantial damage output. It's got an okay tank on it. It is mid-row though, so it isn't your tank ship. It will be behind those, but because its damage output is so much better, and generally it's just better against all ship types. It does better versus Frigg and Desi. It does pretty good against Cruiser. It's good against other battle cruisers. It can hit carriers. So yeah, it's generally just better at pretty much everything. It's just got, yeah, not much else to say about it. So there you go. That is at base. Now, let's reset and let's talk about them when they're maxed out. And I'll go from best to worst again. The ST-59, again, unfortunately, still probably the worst of the battle cruisers. But it's going to go up to B tier. Now, the problem with it is, again, the weapon systems aren't great. And yes, you can get energy turrets for it, which does make it considerably better. Also get some very nice armor systems in the case of the heavy armor, bringing it up to absolutely absurd amounts of armor, to the point where it mitigates the, like, even some of the heaviest damage weapons by 50%, which is fantastic. Base HP is pretty poor still, so it can still go down relatively quickly. And if you are running heavy armor and you run into an energy fleet, it melts like anything else. It has EM armor on the other hand. Great, you can put EM armor now. It hits around 300-ish armor that way, but it gets up to about 75-85% energy resistance, which does make it probably a better all-round for the ship. But again, you've lost that heavy armor and stuff. It would have been nice if there was a, being the defensive battle cruiser, something that gave it maybe 500 armor, 50% energy resistance, so it's right nicely sat right in the middle of damage mitigation on both sides of the story, and it'd probably maybe even go to A tier at that there. It's still got the issue, it's slow as hell, and yeah, its weapons still suck. The front weapons, you've got the bow-mounted battery system, which is what I'm currently running, and that shoots small targets, Desi and Frigate, and then I put the energy turrets on at the current moment, and it can kill stuff, and its DPM's alright. Or you can go the heavy version, which is the big heavy torpedoes and the rail guns. Those rail guns can't seem to shoot things either. I've seen them missing against bases. Yeah, big, giant, stationary target. Just bullets whizzing past it. It's fine. So, yeah, it's just kind of in a bad state. Honestly, it genuinely, I think the ST-59 needs, like, a bit of love from the devs, and they need to come in and either rework its hit rates to just boost its, natural damage up, or potentially maybe just rework some of the weapons on it, because they're just a bit meh. Now, it gets a bit more difficult for me from here, because I don't own any of these, and I definitely don't have them anywhere. Well, I do own the bases of them, but I don't have them anywhere near maxed. However, I've seen plenty of battle reports. I have first-hand guys have come up to me and said, this is really good because of this, and stuff like that. So I've just taken all of their opinions and formed my own, which is probably incorrect anyway. But, oh well. So, I reckon the next worst, and it's quite borderline on par with, is the Eternal Storm. But I think the Spear of Uranus is right next to it. So, the Eternal Storm, I'm going to move it into A. It gets absolutely absurd amounts of DPM and energy damage, and it will absolutely shred and wreck battle cruisers. It struggles. Anything cruiser and below, it struggles to hit in pretty much most of its configurations. And that's its biggest problem, in my opinion. And it causes it to lose potential DPM, and its only usage is against anti-large, very super heavy fleets, which you don't really see. I'm in my 5th server. Most of the guys I'm fighting are 4 servers and above. Most of them have cruisers and have all the cruisers at least, or at least some of the really good ones. And even then, you still find people running frigate destroyer fleet. Even I run a frigate destroyer fleet, and it leaves my cruiser fleet for dead in terms of survivability and therefore damage, because it lasts longer, it kills more. So the Eternal Storm, unless something happens, we see the likes of battleships turn up into the game, and then it's, you know, it could be extremely good at destroying those. But for now, it's unfortunately not. The Spear of Uranus, with its mods and stuff like that, is a better tank than the ST-59. It can heal itself. It can heal other ships with the help of the UAVs. It has a semi-decent armor capability as well, boosting its HP and everything up, which is also really nice, making it even more tanky. It's got very, very high DPM weapons, and against large ships, it will rip them apart, the same way an Eternal Storm is. But the Spear can struggle against an ST-59 a little bit more with heavy armor, whereas the Eternal Storm won't. Although at the same time, you could argue the Eternal Storm will struggle against an ST-59 with EM armor. But yeah, the Spear in general just does better. It hits cruisers a little bit easier with either the medium cannons or the heavy cannons on that front row. It's just better. It's a good all-round battle cruiser in my opinion. Its only real downfall is it's slow. Something else I should have mentioned about the Eternal Storm is it's pretty damn fast. I think it's the fastest battle cruiser in the game, so it's actually quite nice for that. For sort of slightly medium speed fleets, it can fit into those quite nicely. So yeah, Spear, yeah, it's okay. Well, I say it's okay, it's rated A, top of A. Constantine the Great, that will go into S tier. With its mods, it just out DPMs all the other battlecruisers by a substantial amount. The Spears on paper DPM is higher, but the CTGs is just, it's more efficient, it's more effective in actual usage. It's faster than the Spears, so it can fit in most fleets with no issue. Once you got the energy missiles on it as well, it's just absolutely devastating to fleets. It will rip fleets apart like absolutely nobody's business, and it doesn't care if it's a frigate, destroyer, cruiser, carrier. It doesn't care. It's just going to do absurd amounts of damage, where the problem with the Spear and the Eternal is absurd amounts of damage, more against heavy targets. The Constantine the Great doesn't have that issue. It's not constrained by its target profile. It just hits the frigates and destroyers quite well, and it'll hit cruisers and battle cruisers up extremely well, and it just applies its DPM far too efficiently. It isn't anywhere near as tanky though, which is a bit unfortunate for it in comparison to the Spear. But again, it's a mid-row, so you can put tank in front of it and keep it alive, and the fact that you can keep it alive for longer and it's not on the front row may actually help it out in the long term of the amount of DPM it can produce. Pretty much all of the whales that have like just nuked my fleets down have had Constantine the Greats, with one exception having Spears. But yeah, it's almost always CTGs, and the reason for that is they are absurdly powerful against pretty much any fleet type, so they are just better all-rounders at almost everything. So there we go. That would be my 2 rankings of these. One for base, and then one for with them fully modded. And yeah, CTG in S, Spear and Eternal in A, and the poor little ST-59 trailing in B. It's kind of borderline C tier when you actually compare it to the other 3, to be honest. Either way, hope you've enjoyed, hope you find this useful. Don't forget to like, comment and subscribe, and I'll catch you next time.